Surely you have heard of the false gods, the three pretenders, the Tribunal, the three who stole the holy seats from good Daedra, supplanting their worship, their adoration. For thousands of years, the living god-kings of Morrowind ruled the land, bringing about a golden age. Almalexia, Sotha Sil, and Vivec, also known collectively as Almsavie, were loved by the Dunmer people, and in return for this love, they granted progress, protection, and prosperity. It is no wonder the three Daedra referred to as the good Daedra were so easily replaced, but it is a deception. The prosperity, the protection, it was given, but not earned. The Dunmer did not suffer. They were no longer forged in the trials of overcoming adversity, a philosophy inherent in the teachings of Veloth and the good Daedra. Azura, Queen of Dawn and Dusk, Boethia, Prince of Plots, and Mephala, the web spinner, as they are named, were responsible for the departure of the prophet Veloth from the Somerset Isles. They were responsible for the Kaimer settling in Resdayn, now known as Morrowind. They were responsible for the Dunmer's form of ashen skin and red eyes, and it is they who would be responsible for ending the golden age of the Dunmer, resulting in punishment and suffering, a dire lesson for the Dark Elves. What is up, ladies and gentlemen? My name is Scott from FudgeMuppet, and today we are looking at the Tribunal of Living Gods, especially in contrast to the three good Daedra that preceded them. In retrospect, they may be called pretenders, demoted to mere saints, but let us not forget that for most of Dunmer history, they were regarded as the true and rightful gods of the Dunmer people. First, the essential information you need to know is that after the Battle of Red Mountain, after the death of Lord Indoral Nerevar, leader of the Kaimer, his three advisors, his tribunal, his queen Almalexia and his two advisors Sotha Sil and Vivec, used the tools of Kagrenac and stole divine power, making them the living gods of Morrowind. As they betrayed the word of Nerevar, Azura's champion, Azura cursed the Kaimer people, turning their skin grey and eyes red, making the Dunmer. She also spoke the prophecy of Nerevar's return to right the wrongs of the Tribunal. The Tribunal, with their newfound power, could deny the curse of ashen skin, and they defied the Daedra. They led the Dunmer people to greatness. They supplanted the worship of the traditional Daedric princes, and they became the focus of all Dunmer theology. The Tribunal Temple became the ultimate power of Morrowind. Now, of course, you could imagine that taking the place of the good Daedra would be no easy task. I mean, there are many who would downright refuse to worship or acknowledge their divinity, and in fact, the Ashlander tribes were amongst such groups. Well, the Tribunal did something clever, like real religions have done, a little thing called integration. You see, in the real world, if you were to look at Christianity, for example, one of the reasons it was so successful is because it had a more one-size-fits-all approach, a religious explanation that can encompass others. When in the process of converting other cultures, instead of downright denying important local deities, they incorporated them into the Christian canon as saints. It is a much easier transition to come to the realization that your gods are in fact saints or powerful spirits that lie under the greatest god of Christianity, rather than flat out denying local mythology and folklore. Well, in a similar way, the Tribunal smoothed over their ascendancy to godhood by positioning the good Daedra as the anticipations of themselves. Let's read a few passages from the book aptly named The Anticipation. It explains it very nicely. The Daedra are powerful ancestor spirits, similar in form and substance to the Tribunal, blessed be their holy names, but weaker in power and more arbitrary and removed from the affairs of mortals. In old times, the Kaimer worshipped the Daedra as gods, but they did not deserve this veneration, for the Daedra harm their worshippers as often as help them. The advent of the Tribunal, blessed be their holy names, changed this unhappy state. By the apotheosis, the Tribunal, blessed be their holy names, became the protectors and high ancestor spirits of the Dunmer, and bade the Daedra to give proper veneration and obedience. The three good Daedra, Boethia, Azura, and Mephala, recognized the divinity of the triune ancestors, blessed be their holy names. The good Daedra are known to the temple as the Anticipations, since they are the early ancestral anticipations of the loving patronage of the Tribunal. The Anticipations are the Daedric lords Boethia, Mephala, and Azura. What a spin. You can see how the Tribunal positioned themselves, defining the three Daedra as cruel but necessary masters for the Chimera to be free, but now it is time for a more loving and caring type of leadership to usher in a time of prosperity. The Tribunal Temple maintained this perception for thousands of years, and to be fair, the Tribunal were more compassionate than their predecessors, but not all the houses share the same level of devotion. The Great House Indoril was the most deeply rooted in the temple hierarchy. Their members dominated the priest caste as well as the ordinators, the temple warriors and protectors. The Great House Redoran were also one of the more pious houses. The Buoyant Armigers are a Redoran-dominated group in dedication to Vivec specifically. House Slalu is devoted when it pays, House Dress supports the temple as long as it condones and protects its slave trade, and House Telvanni cares the least, with many of the mage lords more concerned with power than piety. Now that you understand the context, the gist of their ascension, and the dominance of the Tribunal Temple, let us look at each of the Tribunal members individually. First, Almalexia.
She believes her tales implicitly, as does everyone else. Her capacity for deception appears limitless. She sows lies like a master gardener sows seeds, and the harvest of trust and adulation is breathtaking in scope. Almalexia does what she does because she cannot do otherwise. It will not end well. But then, even the best endings rarely bring joy.
Almalexia, I am, lover, warden, lady of mercy, mother of Morrowind. Boethia is her anticipation, and in her godhood she retained the golden skin appearance of the Chimera, standing out amongst her people. She is the protector of the poor and the weak, the greatest source of sympathy, compassion, and forgiveness. Her temple city is named Mournhold, the City of Light and Magic, also known as the City of Gems. It is the most ancient city of Morrowind, located in the heart of the Dashan region. Surrounding her grand temple city is the greater city named in her honor, called Almalexia. Of course, by the time of Skyrim, Iam is long gone, and the city has suffered many cataclysmic events but is slowly being rebuilt. Before her godhood, as a mortal all those years ago, Almalexia was the wife of the Lord Councillor Indoril Nerevar, whom she may or may not have conspired to kill with Vivec and Sotha Sil, but regardless, after her divinity, she became a consort of Vivec, a bit of salt in the wound for Nerevar. Regardless of her potential ill actions towards her husband and her egomaniacal tendencies, she really did provide for her people. There are countless acts of her kindness, bestowing her blessings, said to do extraordinary things, such as protecting people from the physical ailments of chronic diseases. She also created children's tales and fables with the intent of nurturing the morality of her people, a more tender and accessible format, as opposed to the teachings of Vivec, which at times sound insane. Some of such teachings of Almalexia contained in the book Homilies of Blessed Almalexia, such as the tale of Sotha Sil and the Scrib. Young Sotha Sil, while playing in the egg mines, saw a number of scribs in a deep shaft, and he began to cast stones upon them, snickering as they skittered and scattered, until one of the scribs, lifting its head up in agony, cried out to Sotha Sil, "Please, please, have mercy, little boy, for what is sport to you is suffering and death to us." And so Sotha Sil discovered that the idle amusements of one may be the solemn tortures of another. Almalexia may be a teller of children's stories, but do not mistake her compassion and sympathy for meekness. Almalexia is fierce in battle. With Sotha Sil, she fought against the Daedric Prince Mehrunes Dagon, who was rampaging through Mournhold, and banished him. And the Nerevarine knows all too well her power. Almalexia began going mad with the loss of the Heart of Lorkhan. Her fading divinity diminished her mind, and she would murder Sotha Sil and attempt to kill the Nerevarine, wearing her war mask and brandishing her blade of blue flames. Her blade is Hope's Fire, twin blade of True Flame, a Dwemer sword gifted to her by Dumak Dwarf King during the times of the Chimera-Dwemer alliance. Her depleting power, however, and underestimation of the Nerevarine led to her demise, so you already know the fate of Sotha Sil, but you don't know his story, his accomplishments.
I am whatever the people need me to be. A guardian, an oppressor. For some, too distant. For others, too meddlesome. I am the canvas upon which they paint their dreams and resentments. A vessel for their hopes and doubts. A mirror, nothing more.
Sotha Sil, set, father of mysteries, magician, sorcerer, tinkerer, clockwork god, architect of time and binder of oblivion. Azura is his anticipation. The wizard mystic god of the Dunmer is the hardest to know, often reserved and introspective, dealing with the transcendent and metaphysical rather than the worldly concerns of the Dunmer people. In defiance of Azura and Nerevar, Sotha Sil was most enthusiastic about using the tools of Kagranak to achieve divinity. When Azura cursed the Kaima with transformation into the Dunmer, he had the power to resist, but instead chose to take on the ashen skin and red eyes in solidarity with the people. He taunted Azura directly, claiming her time as a god is over, and that he, along with the tribunal, would care for their people. Sotha Sil had always been curious and perfecting, and this led him, after his newly attained godhood, to begin construction of his magnum opus. He saw Nirn as flawed, and he sought to perfect it. His answer was the Clockwork City, a redemption. He looked to none other than the Dwemer for inspiration, the most advanced race to ever exist. He created many Dwemer-like automatons, constructions, and even dabbled in tonal architecture, but for this reason the enigmatic Sotha Sil remained so to the Dunmer people, compared to the publicity and grandeur of Vivec and Almalexia. However, he was once invested in the affairs of the Dunmer, perhaps even more so than the rest of the tribunal. He was said to have felt the stress of each of his people, and he protected them, cared for them, actions likely deriving from his own traumatic childhood, the destruction of his house at the hands of Mehrunes Dagon, which was also a likely motivation for his hatred of the Daedra. But his obsession with the Clockwork City would eventually distract him from such affairs. Sotha Sil was also known to have spent some time amongst the Sijic monks on the Isle of Artaeum, teaching some of the new mages. He even at one point made 8 of the Daedric princes adhere to the rules of a pact, stating they would not respond to summoners not setting foot on Tamriel. Who knows what he could have accomplished had he not been betrayed by Almalexia, but alas, there is another god of the tribunal that we must speak of.
Vivec craves writable freedom, the death of all limits and restrictions. He wishes to be all things at all times. Every race, every gender, every hero, both divine and finite. But in the end, he can only be Vivec.
Vivec. Vec. Warrior, poet and guardian, god king of Vardenfell. His anticipation is Mephala, and his skin is half Dunmer, half Kaima, representing the duality of the Dunmer spirit. The ever-vigilant protector of Morrowind against the dark gods of Red Mountain, Vivec is a character shrouded in metaphor, contradiction, and confusion, but it is these things that are at the core of his character. He embodies duality. He is a hermaphrodite, part male, part female. He is part Kaima, part Dunmer. He is both valiant knight and protector, while also devious murderer and rogue. He is much like his anticipation in those respects. Mephala is also referred to as the androgyne and embodies dualistic features. Listen to this passage from the book Vivec and Mephala. As known in the West, Mephala is the demon of murder, sex, and secrets. All of these themes contain subtle aspects and violent ones. Assassination and genocide, courtship and orgy, tact and poetic truths. Mephala is understood paradoxically to contain and integrate these contradictory themes, and all of these subtle undercurrents and contradictions are present in the Dunmer concepts of Vivec, even if they are not explicitly described and explained in temple doctrine. The Dunmer do not envision Lord Vivec as a creature of murder, sex, and secrets. Rather, they conceive of Lord Vivec as benevolent king, guardian warrior, poet, artist, but at the same time, unconsciously, they accept the notion of darker hidden currents beneath Vivec's benevolent aspects. Vivec himself was a prolific writer of history, poetry, and philosophy. He was considered the authority on many esoteric and metaphysical concepts such as the walking ways, paths to achieving divinity. Vivec was also a great hero of the Dunmer, repelling Akaviri invasions, drowning them in a summoned flood, or defeating the Riemann Empire on multiple occasions and using his diplomatic skills to end the very same fourscore war. There are a great many tales of his more mythological battles, such as battles with the Ruddy Man, and we can't forget his powerful spear Muatra, which has some curious origins, you could say. Vivec's ultimate fate is unknown. Whether he was killed or simply disappeared, his absence was felt nonetheless by the Dunmer through the various cataclysms that came after. What's interesting to note, however, is that Vivec somewhat engineered his own downfall. He knew what had to be done. The 36 lessons of Vivec primarily act as a guide for the Nerevarine. He did not know who the Nerevarine was, so he made these lessons public, and he knew that the prophecy must come true in order to defeat the Sharmat, Dagoth But the caveat to that is the resulting loss of the Tribunal's divinity, which resulted in Almalexia going mad, killing Sotha Sil, and Almalexia being killed by the Nerevarine. Vivec is now but a memory for the Dunmer people, along with the rest of the Tribunal, now mere saints, demoted from their position of gods and replaced by the good Daedra once again, aptly named the Reclamations, for reclaiming their positions as the true Tribunal of the Dunmer faith. But it's interesting to consider that the whole 1,000-year-long stints of the God Kings, the golden age of the Dunmer, proved to be a great lesson for them, for there is utility to suffering, and the Dunmer have suffered much since the beginning of the Fourth Era. I highly recommend you check out the video by Drew on the Psijic Endeavor and why the Dunmer will rise again. It's really well done, it's linked down below in the description, and it expands further on the ideas I just mentioned. Thanks so much for watching, guys. I hope you now have a functional understanding of the Tribunal Gods of Morrowind. Of course, these characters are very deep, and do not worry, we'll be talking about these guys individually at some point. I've thrown around the idea of doing an analysis on the 36 lessons of Vivec and explaining it all in layman's terms, but that may take a long while. Let me know if that interests you guys. Give the video a like for the blessings of Almsavie, subscribe to FudgeMuppet for more in-depth lore videos. My name is Scott from FudgeMuppet, and I'll be back to nerd out with you again next time.